stormy surface flowed the warm tide of compassion and kindness.
What the hell's going on out here? Everybody's grabbing out there. Nobody's touching. Just grabbing, everybody. Grab. Nobody touching.
All right. Welcome to Synergy Coaching and Wellness. What the health is going on here podcast. We're rolling out a new series of podcasts today. And a little bit of the reason is because I get a lot of feedback from my students and from my clients that sometimes they just send me things and it just makes me shake my head and wonder what the health is going on here. And so it happens probably more often than you'd really like for it to, because you'd like for things to be relatively straightforward in something or in areas as critical as health and wellness and longevity. There's just a whole lot of different ideas out there, and then sometimes there's just bad ideas, and sometimes there's just bad science. And so I'm gonna roll these out. I don't know how often I'll do them. I've actually got 3 queued up right now. So this is the first, and certainly won't be the last, unfortunately. But anyway, so today I wanted to talk about, there's a recent study that's been actually posted. I won't say published, I'm going to say posted, by the American Heart Association that studied intermittent fasting, or having a specific eating window. And the study shows a 91% increase in cardiac death from time-restricted eating below an 8-hour window. And it kind of took me off guard when I first saw that, and I thought, what the hell? That's just, there's no way that that's correct information. There's a lot of physiology that feeds into intermittent fasting. And I've never seen anything negative about intermittent fasting. I think sometimes it's overglorified as a singular approach, but I've never seen anything as dramatically negative as this. So I took some time to really dive into the study just a little bit. And I'm going to share those findings with you. And kind of, we educate. I mean, that's our primary role here at Synergy Coaching and Wellness, is education. And sometimes that education needs to include how to read studies, how to look beyond what people are saying to kind of glean the truth of the matter. So we're going to dive into this study a little bit today, and we're going to talk about where this study is actually very flawed in a lot of different ways. Let's start out with just having a discussion about, when we look at a study, what do we want to draw from that study, and how can we really buy into the truth of what's being said. So I'm going to give you a few thoughts, universal thoughts on studies in general. Okay, so I want to start with this one. Like this one is saying that intermittent fasting causes a 91% increase in cardiac mortality. You got to ask yourself some questions when you read such a headline as that. Number one, are the numbers accurate? So, and when I say that, I'm going to jump back to like statin drug studies, to where they'll tell you that they provide, I think they say something to the tune of like a 36% increase in avoidance of cardiovascular disease from taking a statin versus not taking a statin if you have high LDL cholesterol, or even high cholesterol in general. So is that true? Is that a true number? And the actual fact of the matter is that's not actually true. When you look at a particular study like that one, it's actually it's less than a 1% increase. But because the numbers at the baseline are so incredibly small, like it takes a very, very small improvement in number to show a huge benefit from taking that drug. The truth of the matter is there's hardly any benefit at all from taking a statin. And I'm not telling you to not do what your doctor says. I'm just telling you to pay attention to it. And, those particular studies are not as accurate as they make them out to be. In the use of statins, it's probably if not the most overprescribed medication in America today. So anyway, so that's when you look at a number, are the numbers correct? When you get to the bottom validation numbers, are they accurate the way they're portrayed? And sometimes the answer to that is no, they're not. The pharmaceutical companies are obviously wanting to sell this medication. They've spent the money and time to produce it and get it out to market, so they want to make a buck off of it. So they're gonna present their findings in a way that are the absolute most flattering, and they don't necessarily lie, but they create a number that really presents an untruth in how effective the drug actually is. You're going to find when we dive into this particular study that same principle is going to apply here. The other thing is what's really important is, are the group sizes consistent? Like if you're doing comparatives, are group sizes and groups consistent? And as we dive into this study, you're going to find that no, they're not. The group sizes are not consistent. So when we look at these numbers and we look at how we want to look at this particular study, and when we look at all studies, do the numbers make sense? Does it add up? Is it consistent? Is there a fair proportion of group A versus group B? Are those proportionalities correct in order to establish like a true number? And in this particular study we're going to look at in just a moment, the answer is absolutely not. And I'll show you where. So, and the other part, the next thing we want to look at is, at the end of the day, when you look at these studies, science has changed so much in my lifetime. It used to be corollary studies were dismissed out of hand most of the time. Correlation matters to some extent, but correlation is absolutely not causation. You can have corollary numbers, and we'll look at some when we get to this study that, yeah, the corollary might be there, but the causation could be anything because there's absolutely no control in this study. When we look at this study, this study is shocking to me. So, but correlation is not causation. And a lot of times we get locked into looking at a number that says something to the effect that, 50% of people that do this have this response to it. Well, that may be true. The correlation might be correct, but the reality of causation could be something totally different. And without really defining and controlling your groups, you don't know. You don't know if that's the causation or not. You just know that there's a corollary between this and this. And that is really bad science. That's just really bad science. You should always look at who's funding the study too. It's unfortunate that we can't trust in science completely, but we can't. Especially when it comes to our health and wellness. If we're on the journey to take control of our health and wellness, we have to be able to make our own decisions about things that pertain to our health and wellness. And we have to be able to, Felix Frankfurter, and I don't know if you know who he is, he was a Supreme Court justice. He used to call it separating wheat from chaff. Okay, that was That was his phraseology on how to take data, how to take information and get rid of the junk and hold on to what's worthwhile. So he used to call it separating wheat from chaff, and I've kind of held on to that most of my life. But depending upon who's funding the study will depend upon the presentation of the outcomes of the numbers. And so you need to be aware of that. And then finally, and most of the time you wouldn't even think that you'd need to be aware of this, but is the doggone study even valid? Has it been peer reviewed? Are there proper scientific controls? We talked about that just a few minutes ago on when you're trying to extrapolate data. Are the controls in place so that you don't have like these wild corollary numbers that clearly don't show any causation? So that's why we put control in scientific study. So are there proper controls? That's an important thing. And then are groups even valid in terms of what's being studied? And I put this one in primarily for this study because what you're going to find out as we dive into it is that the groups aren't even valid. When you look at they're not even intermittent fasting groups. They're people who have shortened eating windows. So anyway, so that's pretty much some of the main things that you need to look at when you're looking at a study, especially something that just catch you off guard. Like this one really caught me off guard. So we'll dive into this study here in just a second. And anyway, I wanted to take just a minute. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please smash that like button. Also, please subscribe to Synergy Coaching channel so that you'll be notified of any future content that we have out there. The more people that we have signed up and subscribing to the channel, and the more people that watch and share, please share this content as well. So I would really appreciate it. It helps with the algorithms, helps us grow the channel, and helps us get information out to everybody. All right, so let's get started on this study. I'm going to pop it up here so that you guys can look at it. This is kind of an intro, and actually the study's not even published. Okay, the people who did the study haven't published it. I don't know why the American Heart Association grabbed this and put it out before it's even published. It's not published. It's not peer reviewed. But this is a little intro into the table that we're going to go over. The table is the only thing that's been posted or published. We'll call it posted. I don't want to say it's published. It's not published. And they clearly state right here, a couple of things that if you read this, you probably ought not even read further into the study or even read the tables, because just reading this paragraph, I knew that it was not going to be an accurate or scientific study. So number one, and I've highlighted the things on here, it says have not been peer reviewed. Okay, the findings are preliminary and have not been peer reviewed. Well, okay, so that's critically important in the scientific community that your work gets peer reviewed. If it's not peer reviewed, it's like eating a cake that's not fully baked. So it hasn't even been through the review process. So it's out there and in the public far too early. So the next line that I've got highlighted is critically important. It says the average of 2-day dietary recalls may not accurately estimate usual eating duration. Well, what the hell? I mean, that's what this whole thing's about, right? It's supposed to be like a systematic. If you're attacking intermittent fasting, it's not something you do for 2 days. It's something that you do on a consistent basis. And you do it and you know that you do it. So the fact that they don't even know if these people consistently eat with restricted eating windows tells you that this study is bogus from the get-go. So you read that line, you probably ought not read any farther either. Okay, importantly, the link between 8-hour eating duration and cardiovascular mortality is an association, not a causal relationship. Well, that's what we just talked about. You know, if it just because it's corollary does not mean that it's causation, and that's critically important. So anyway, so that just reading what they put out there before you start diving into their table presents massive red flags. So anyway, so let's move on to the table itself, and we'll kind of look at this thing. And I've highlighted a couple of things on here. We talked before about group sizes. So if we're going to do a comparative, all right, and that's all this is a comparison. They're trying to find some corollary effect on an 8-hour eating window. Well, you would expect for the two primary groups that they're comparing. So what they're comparing people who have an eating window of 8 hours or less, which is a typical intermittent faster, because most intermittent fasters are going to be 16-8 that would be the 8-hour eating window or less. Okay, and they're comparing it with what they consider a normal eating window, which is 12 to 16 hours. Well, so when we look at the two groups, it's a very top line here that you can see as we've got posted. There are 414 in the study that eat less or have a feeding window less than 8 hours. It's 11,531 in the group that have a 12 to 16 hour eating window. Let me tell you, 413, I can't read that number. That's not a very large sample size. And it's even a worse sample size as we start diving into this study a little bit more. As you approach, 11,500, that's a pretty good sample size. That'll give you some indication about, what goes on within this group. So that's a strike. Okay, that's a problem when all you're looking at, there's such a variance in group size. Now, if the less than 8 hour eating window group was 11,000 and the 12 to 16 feeding window group was 26,000, those would both be significant group sizes, right? Even though there's a significant difference in the numbers, when you get to the number of 11,000 plus, you can begin to feel pretty comfortable with your statistical data. So I would be okay with that, with the group size just being larger for the less than 8 hour eating window guys. One of the most important things that I saw in here, and I've got it highlighted, it's the second highlight down, is the percentage number of smokers. If you look at the less than 8 hours, it's 27+% people in that group that they were studying that smoke, whereas it's only 16, well, we'll say 16.9, so it's 17%. I mean, that's a 10% difference in the number of people that have the number one bad habit that leads to cardiovascular disease. So that'll tell you something too, and as we discuss after we go through this report, we'll talk about that a little bit, because that tells me something. Okay, that tells me, I come from the business world, and I can tell you that this tells me something because of the people that I know. And the last number that I want to look at is the BMI numbers of these two groups. When you look at the BMI, of the less than 8 hour group, all right, you're looking at a BMI that's right at 30. Okay, so we already know that you're outside of the healthiest range. 30 is not an end of the world number on BMI, but that's so that's the number for the less than 8 hour window group. The less than 8 hour, or the 12 to 16 hour, is 28.5. So it's a full 1.5 lower than the group that is eating less than 8 hours. That number is significant as well, because as we look at, when we look at obesity, and as we've talked about multiples of time, it's not just obesity, it's what goes along with obesity. We don't know what cholesterol numbers are here. We don't know what LDL numbers are. We certainly don't know what insulin levels are with any of these folks. But if you've got an average BMI of 30 within the group, there's a pretty good chance that you're looking at a group that has a significantly higher rate of insulin resistance, which can lead to a lot of different illnesses. So just those three numbers alone will tell you that the controls of these groups is just horrible. There's nothing to glean scientifically from this study at this point, because we don't have any controls. We certainly don't know what the causal effects of this, what they call 91%. So now that we've looked at the study itself, and I've given you kind of three baseline numbers or things to look at within the study itself, and then we talked about the issues that even the people that put this table together understand as issues. I want to go back and I want to revisit those initial questions, and we're going to kind of answer those. So, are the study numbers accurate? All right, so this study had a claim of 91% increase in cardiac death. Well, can we glean from this study that is correct? No. There's no way in the world that you just absolutely cannot make that assessment based upon this table. There are too many factors that would tie into that. These groups have other underlying issues that are probably more important, and I think it's pretty clear that it's not the window that people eat, or the time, the length of the duration of the window that people are eating. I think there's going to be a lot of other more causal effects. Are the groups consistent in sizes? And they're not. We determined that they're not. But I want to interject something here. When we look at the numbers of the people in this study, and when we look at the less than 8 hour window, the feeding window folks, they have a higher percent smoking, they have a higher BMI, and there's no questioning any of them about, is this a cognizant methodology that you're using to control weight, to control your insulin, to help with autophagy, all of the various things that people engage in intermittent fasting for. None of that's in here. I can tell you the majority of these people that they're dealing with are going to be what would be typically I classify them as type D because I always went off of the DISC test. But the classical type A person that is highly driven, that gets up every morning and is in immediate frenzy, doesn't take time to eat breakfast. Their breakfast is coffee and cigarettes. They're out the door, they're always in a rush, and they don't take the time to eat. So when they have a feeding window of 8 hours, that's probably accurate, but it's probably all over the board, and it's certainly not by design, and not by design for health benefits. So, I think that that's a huge issue. I have a huge issue with this study, just in that particular term, they did not question these folks about their lifestyles at all. So the groups are horrific. They're just not. The group that's shown to have a less than 8-hour feeding window is probably not a group of folks. And there might be a few in there. I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There might be a few in there, but they're not your typical intermittent faster, the person who chooses to have an 8-hour feeding window for health purposes, because they know that they also have to eat properly, and it's by design. It's not by the fact that they're late for work and flying out the door. They're minimizing the other negative aspects of their wellness. So I don't like the groups at all. I don't think they're defined clearly enough. As we talked about before, correlation is not causation. So is this bad science? You bet. You bet it is. Is there possibly a motivation for results based upon who's funding the study? It's unknowable. The people that funded this study it's a group out of China. Actually, it's a couple of groups out of China, and I don't know anything about them. So it's certainly unknowable at this point. And then finally, is this study even valid? Is it peer reviewed? Absolutely not. Are there proper scientific controls? Absolutely not. Are groups even valid in terms of what is being studied? I think we've determined that the answer to that is probably not. So in closing, I put up here that the study is a complete sham based upon what's been presented. People that know me, my students and my clients know that I typically don't go all in on statements like that. I've been around this game long enough to know there's a lot of different ways to look at things, okay? But I think this is just such a poorly done study that I don't know what else to call it. And I'm absolutely shocked that the American Heart Association picked up on it and presented it on their webpage, because, intermittent fasting is... I'm not like a lot of intermittent fasters and folks that push intermittent fasting. I believe that intermittent fasting has a place in a repertoire of tools that people can use to solve certain physiological problems. All right. If you're insulin resistant, I think by going on a low carb diet, utilizing intermittent fasting can help you reverse that trend quicker than just about anything else. Do I think that intermittent fasting is necessarily what you should do long term? The jury's still out on that. I don't know. But I do know that I can't physiologically, because I know how these things work within the body, I don't think that intermittent fasting has negative health consequences. I think that when you intermittent fast and you condense your feeding window, I think there are a lot of people that take that and think they can eat whatever the hell they want to. Well, you can't do that. You still have to eat the right foods, and it's still going to be calories in, calories out. Okay, that you cannot change the laws of thermodynamics. Okay, intermittent fasting will help you minimize the number of calories that you bring in a day, because naturally your feeding window is smaller. It has some other physiological benefits within your body to help your basal metabolic rate, because you're not spiking your insulin level multiple times a day. Okay, you're only raising your insulin level when you're eating a couple of times a day in that reduced feeding window. And that's a positive, because as you reduce that, you keep that insulin level reduced for a longer period of time, you kind of break that cycle of insulin constantly spiking and being ready to spike every time you eat something. So there's a lot of benefit to intermittent fasting, but it's not the end all be all. But it's a very healthy thing to do, and when I have students and clients that come to me and they have insulin resistance and they do have like their BMI is off the charts and they're wrestling with obesity, it is absolutely a great first step. So it doesn't mean that you need to be on it forever. Actually, if you watch my video, why are we all so fat? I kind of explained that you're better off moving towards more of a Mediterranean type diet, Mediterranean principled diet over time, okay? But you might have to fix yourself metabolically first. So that's basically it on this study. I obviously don't like it. I'm very disappointed that agencies that people rely on so much, such as the American Heart Association, would actually post this study. It's quite irresponsible, because I do think intermittent fasting done properly can help people. And when an organization like the American Heart Association posts something like that, it takes it off the table for a lot of people. So that it's really disappointing. That's probably the main reason why I wanted to do this today. And it kind of pushed me over the edge to start doing some of these other videos. So like I said before, this What the Health is Going On Here video podcast is going to be something ongoing. We'll have some fun with it. I'm not going to be real negative on this podcast very often, because I don't think that's necessarily the right approach. But I'm a little bit negative on this one because I think this is just really super bad science. But anyway, thanks for taking the time to listen today. As always, reach out if you have any questions. You can reach out to us at www.synergycoaching.com. Visit our webpage there. If you leave me a message there or you email me from there, I'll certainly get back to you as quick as I can. So anyway, thanks for spending time with us today, and we'll catch up soon. See you, bye.
Stormy surface flowed the warm tide of compassion and kindness.
What the hell's going on out here? Everybody's grabbing out there. Nobody's touching. Just grabbing, everybody. Grab, grab, grab. Nobody touching.